The black girl whispered, "I ain't worth much, sir," as winter winds cut through her tattered dress. But when the bearded mountain man found her collapsed form, he vowed through gritted teeth, "You're worth everything to me." The townspeople had cast her out like poison, spitting curses about her corrupting ways with slave children, condemning her to freeze and be forgotten in the Colorado wilderness. They expected wolves or cold to claim another worthless life before spring. But the solitary trapper who discovered her carried secrets darker than hers. Federal warrants, guilt-soaked memories, and a cabin filled with books he couldn't read. Her survival would either damn them both or reveal talents that could expose the town's most powerful man. Neither knew she possessed the one skill that could unravel corruption, save lives, and transform two broken souls into an unstoppable force. Can the dismissed become the deliverer, or will buried truths destroy them first? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The morning frost clung to Janie Moore's bare arms as Sheriff Amos Tully shoved her toward the edge of Willowbrook. Her thin dress offered no protection against the Colorado winter wind that cut through the fabric like razors. The townspeople gathered behind her, their faces twisted with disgust and satisfaction. Tully's weathered hand gripped a bundle of her meager possessions, a torn blanket, a cracked cup, nothing more. He dropped the bundle at her feet without ceremony. The impact scattered dirt across her only shoes, already split at the seams from months of wear. May Weatherby stood among the crowd, her eyes downcast. Her children pressed close to her skirts, whispering questions she couldn't answer. May had seen Janie teaching the slave children to read by candlelight in the church basement. She had said nothing then. She said nothing now. The wind howled across the plains beyond town limits. Snow clouds gathered on the horizon like an approaching army. Janie pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, though it barely covered her chest. Her breath formed small clouds that disappeared instantly in the bitter air. Tully cleared his throat. His badge caught the weak sunlight as he straightened his coat. The metal star looked freshly polished, as if he took pride in this moment. Behind him, 3 other men nodded their approval. Their faces showed no mercy, only the cold satisfaction of a job completed. The sheriff stepped closer to Janie. His boots crunched against the frozen ground. She could smell tobacco and whiskey on his breath. His eyes held no warmth, only the hard certainty of a man convinced of his righteousness. Janie's hands trembled as she bent to gather her bundle. The movement sent pain shooting through her back where stones had struck her during yesterday's march through town. Her fingers fumbled with the knotted cloth, numb from cold and fear. She straightened slowly. Her legs felt weak beneath her, but she forced herself to stand tall. The crowd watched her every movement like vultures waiting for carrion to stop breathing. Some smiled. Others simply stared with the blank indifference reserved for the condemned. Tully pointed toward the wilderness stretching beyond the town's borders. Miles of empty land rolled toward distant mountains. No shelter, no warmth, no mercy waited out there, only the approaching storm and whatever creatures hunted in the darkness. The sheriff's voice carried across the silent crowd when he finally spoke. Each word fell like a hammer blow against Janie's chest. "Don't come back," he told her. "Your kind of trouble isn't welcome here." The finality in his tone left no room for pleading or bargaining. Janie looked back at the faces she had known her entire life. Mrs. Patterson, whose son she had helped learn his letters. Dr. Henley, who had once praised her quick mind. Reverend Cole, in whose church she had taught those secret lessons that brought her to this moment. None of them met her eyes now. They had already erased her from their memories, already begun the process of forgetting she had ever existed among them. To them, she was already dead. The wilderness would simply make it official. The wind picked up strength, carrying the scent of snow and pine from the mountains. Janie's hair whipped around her face as she took her first step beyond the town's protection. The ground beneath her feet felt different here, less solid somehow, as if the earth itself knew she no longer belonged anywhere. Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper when she spoke. The words carried away on the wind almost before they left her lips. "I ain't worth much anyway, sir." The admission felt like surrendering the last piece of her soul. 20 miles up in the mountain wilderness, Caleb Briggs sat hunched over a wooden table in his log cabin. Papers scattered across the surface like fallen leaves. Trading contracts, land deeds, legal notices he couldn't decipher. His weathered fingers traced the letters he recognized, but whole sentences remained as mysterious as ancient hieroglyphs. The fire in his stone hearth crackled and popped, sending shadows dancing across the walls. Shelves lined with books surrounded him, volumes he had collected over years of trading and bartering. Each one mocked him with knowledge he couldn't access, words that held power he couldn't claim. Caleb's past pressed down on him like the weight of the mountain itself, memories of chains and bounty payments, faces of people he had tracked and captured for money. The federal warrant hidden among his papers served as a constant reminder of the man he used to be and the justice that might still find him. He stood and walked to his single window. The glass was thick and imperfect, distorting the view of the valley below. Somewhere down there, people lived their lives in communities he could never rejoin. His exile was self-imposed, but no less permanent than any court sentence. The storm clouds he could see gathering in the distance meant another few days of isolation. More time alone with his guilt and his books and his memories. More time to wonder if redemption was possible for a man like him. More time to question whether he deserved the peace he sought in these mountains. Outside, the first snowflakes began to fall. They drifted past his window like tiny prayers, each one unique and fragile. Caleb watched them accumulate on his windowsill, knowing that somewhere below, the storm would test anyone caught unprepared. He had no way of knowing that 20 miles away, a young woman was walking toward certain death, carrying secrets that could save them both. The blizzard struck 3 hours after Janie left Willowbrook's borders. Snow fell in thick sheets that erased the world around her. Each step forward became a battle against wind that seemed determined to push her back toward the town that no longer wanted her. Her feet had lost feeling an hour ago. The thin soles of her worn shoes provided no protection against the frozen ground. Ice crystals formed in her hair and on her eyelashes, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. The bundle of her possessions felt heavier with each passing minute. Janie stumbled over a hidden root and fell to her knees. The impact sent sharp pain through her legs, but the cold had numbed most sensation. She remained there for several moments, breathing hard, watching her breath form clouds that disappeared instantly in the swirling snow. Standing required effort she wasn't sure she possessed. Her legs shook as she pushed herself upright. The storm had erased any landmarks she might have used for navigation. Every direction looked identical now. White ground met white sky in an endless expanse of nothing. Her lips moved in silent prayer, though she wondered if God listened to the prayers of the condemned. The church had cast her out along with the town. Perhaps salvation was reserved for those who stayed within accepted boundaries. Perhaps she had forfeited divine protection when she chose to teach forbidden lessons. The wind died to a whisper for a brief moment. In that stillness, Janie heard something that made her blood freeze colder than the storm. Howling in the distance. Not wind this time, but something alive. Something hunting. Fear gave her strength she didn't know remained. She forced her legs to move faster, though each step felt like walking through thick mud. The bundle slipped from her numb fingers and fell into the snow. She stared at it for a heartbeat, then kept walking. Survival mattered more than possessions now. The howling came again, closer this time. Multiple voices joined the chorus. A pack had caught her scent despite the storm. They were closing in on prey too weak to fight back. Janie's heart hammered against her ribs as she searched desperately for shelter. A dark shape loomed ahead through the snow. At first she thought it might be a large boulder or fallen tree. As she drew closer, hope flickered in her chest. A small cabin sat nestled against a cluster of pine trees. Smoke rose from its chimney, indicating warmth and life inside. She stumbled toward the structure on unsteady legs. Her hands were too numb to knock properly on the wooden door. Instead, she fell against it, her body weight creating a dull thump that echoed inside. Then darkness claimed her. Caleb heard the sound over the crackling of his fire. He set down the trading contract he had been struggling to decipher and moved toward the door. Opening it revealed a young woman collapsed on his threshold, her dark skin showing the gray pallor of severe cold exposure. He lifted her easily despite her dead weight. Her body felt like ice against his arms. Snow clung to her hair and clothes, melting immediately in the cabin's warmth. He carried her to the chair closest to his fireplace and began the careful process of revival. Blankets, warm broth, gentle rubbing of her hands and feet to restore circulation. Caleb had rescued enough travelers over the years to know the routine. What surprised him was the care he found himself taking with this particular rescue. Something about her stirred protective instincts he thought had died with his conscience years ago. Janie's eyes opened gradually as warmth returned to her body. The first thing she saw was the fire dancing in the stone hearth. The second was shelves upon shelves of books lining the cabin walls. Her eyes widened with recognition and wonder. She had never seen so many books outside of a church or schoolhouse. The mountain man sat across from her, watching her recovery with quiet intensity. His beard was streaked with gray, his hands scarred from years of hard living, but his eyes held kindness she hadn't expected. When he spoke, his voice was gentle. "You're safe now," he told her. "The storm will pass." Janie tried to speak, but managed only a whisper. The words came out cracked and uncertain. "I ain't worth the trouble, sir." The phrase carried the weight of a lifetime's conditioning, the automatic response of someone taught to apologize for existing. Caleb studied her face in the firelight. "Worth ain't for others to decide, miss." The simple statement hung in the air between them like a challenge to everything she had been taught about her place in the world. Her attention drifted back to the books surrounding them. Titles she recognized mixed with others that were foreign to her. Law books, medical texts, literature and poetry, a fortune in knowledge that most people would never access. Her fingers twitched with the desire to touch the leather bindings. Caleb noticed her fascination. Most folks don't pay much attention to those old things. His voice carried embarrassment and frustration. "They're pretty to look at, but that's about all they're good for." He moved to his table and picked up the contract he had been studying earlier. The paper shook slightly in his hands as he held it toward the light. "The trader wants an answer tomorrow, but these legal words might as well be written in a foreign language." Janie sat up straighter in her chair. The movement sent fresh warmth through her recovering limbs. "May I see it?" she asked quietly. The question surprised them both. Caleb hesitated, then handed her the document. Janie took it with steady hands and began to read. Her eyes moved quickly across the lines of text, absorbing information with practiced efficiency. Within moments, her expression changed from curiosity to concern. "This contract is designed to cheat you," she said firmly. "The trader claims mineral rights to your land in exchange for basic supplies. You would be signing away ownership of anything valuable beneath the ground." Caleb stared at her with shock that bordered on disbelief. "You can read this better than I ever could." His worldview shifted with those simple words. Everything he thought he knew about worth and education and the natural order crumbled in the face of this revelation. Janie nodded slowly. "I taught myself from whatever books I could find. Then I taught others, which is why I ended up in that storm." The admission carried both pride and pain. The mountain man sat back in his chair, reassessing everything about his unexpected guest. The woman he had rescued from certain death possessed skills that could change both their lives, skills that the world had tried to bury in prejudice and fear. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the mountain. Inside, two outcasts began to discover that worth had nothing to do with what others believed, and everything to do with what they could offer each other. 3 days passed before the storm cleared enough for proper conversation. Janie spent the time recovering her strength while Caleb tended to his traps and daily chores. Neither spoke much, but awareness crackled between them like static electricity. Each had found something unexpected in the other. On the 4th morning, Janie rose early and began organizing the chaos that was Caleb's business affairs. Papers lay scattered across every surface, trading contracts mixed with land deeds, bills of sale tangled with legal notices. Years of accumulated documents created a maze of confusion that would challenge even a skilled clerk. Caleb returned from checking his snares to find neat stacks arranged across his table. Each pile was labeled in clear handwriting that put his own scrawl to shame. Completed contracts, pending agreements, legal notices requiring immediate attention. The transformation stunned him into silence. Janie looked up from a particularly complex mining agreement. "You've been systematically cheated for years," she said without preamble. "This trader alone has overcharged you for supplies while underpaying for furs. The calculations show losses in the hundreds of dollars." The mountain man pulled up a chair beside her. His weathered hands traced the neat columns of figures she had written in the margins. Numbers had always been his enemy, but her explanations made the mathematics clear. For the first time, he understood exactly how much his illiteracy had cost him. "There's more," Janie continued, her voice dropping lower. She reached for a document buried beneath the others. "This paper grants mineral exploration rights to your land. You signed it thinking it was a standard trading agreement. The difference could mean thousands if there's gold or silver in these mountains." Caleb examined his own signature at the bottom of the page. The memory came flooding back. The trader had rushed him, claiming the document was routine paperwork for fur sales. His inability to read the fine print had made him an easy target for deception. "Can it be reversed?" he asked quietly. The question carried years of accumulated frustration and newfound hope. Janie studied the contract more carefully. "There's a clause here about fraudulent representation. If we can prove you were deliberately misled about the document's contents, a judge might void the agreement." Her finger traced the relevant passage as she explained the legal reasoning. She continued sorting through his papers while he watched in amazement. Her mind worked like a precision instrument, categorizing and analyzing information with skills that rivaled any lawyer he had encountered. The woman his neighbors would dismiss as worthless possessed abilities they desperately needed, but would never acknowledge. That afternoon, Janie made a discovery that changed everything between them. Buried beneath a stack of old receipts, she found a federal warrant bearing Caleb's name and description. The charges were clear: aiding and abetting fugitive slaves, obstruction of federal law enforcement, conspiracy to interfere with lawful property recovery. She read the document twice, absorbing every detail. The dates matched stories she had heard whispered in slave quarters about a bounty hunter who sometimes developed a conscience. A man who would track fugitives for days, then claim he lost their trail just miles from freedom. The authorities had finally connected enough cases to issue formal charges. Caleb found her staring at the warrant when he returned from splitting firewood. The paper trembled in her hands, but not from cold this time. Understanding passed between them without words. She knew his secret now. His exile was not entirely voluntary. "You could turn me in," he said simply. "Federal marshals would pay good money for information about my location, enough to buy safe passage to any territory where your past doesn't matter." Janie folded the warrant carefully and placed it back where she had found it. The gesture spoke louder than any verbal response. She had made her choice without hesitation or negotiation. His crimes, if they could be called crimes, had been acts of mercy rather than malice. Their partnership deepened over the following days. Caleb taught her practical survival skills: how to read weather patterns and cloud formations, which plants remained edible through winter months, how to set snares that would provide fresh meat without depleting local wildlife populations. In return, Janie revolutionized his business operations. She drafted clear correspondence with trading partners, calculated fair prices for his furs based on market rates rather than accepting whatever buyers offered, organized his legal documents in ways that protected his interests and property rights. Evening conversations by the fire became the heart of their developing relationship. Caleb would describe his travels through the territory, while Janie shared stories from the books that surrounded them. Her education had been pieced together from whatever materials she could find: creating gaps in knowledge that he helped fill with practical experience. The balance felt natural despite their vastly different backgrounds. Neither had to pretend or diminish themselves for the other's comfort. Their skills complemented rather than competed. Their shared status as outcasts created understanding that needed no explanation. One evening, as snow began falling again outside their warm cabin, Caleb made a statement that surprised them both with its simple honesty. "You're worth everything to me," he said quietly. "Not because I saved you from that storm, but because you saved me right back." Janie looked up from the legal brief she was preparing on his behalf. The firelight caught the intelligence in her eyes, the strength that no amount of societal rejection had managed to break. For the first time since leaving Willowbrook, she began to believe that worth might indeed be something internal rather than externally imposed. Outside their sanctuary, the world continued to operate according to rules that would never accept their partnership. But inside the cabin, surrounded by books and warmed by honest fire, two discarded souls had found something neither had dared hope for. They had found someone who saw their true value and reflected it back without conditions or apology. The storm that had nearly killed Janie had instead delivered salvation for both of them. Now they would discover if their combined strengths could withstand the greater storms that society would surely send their way. The riders appeared at dawn 2 weeks later, their horses steaming in the cold mountain air. Sheriff Tully led 3 deputies up the winding trail toward Caleb's cabin. Their official reason was investigating reports of vagrant activity in the area. Their real purpose ran much deeper. Word had reached Willowbrook about valuable mineral deposits in the high country. Claims were being filed. Fortunes were being made. Tully wanted his share of the wealth, and that required removing inconvenient obstacles like mountain hermits with legal land rights. Caleb spotted them through his window while splitting kindling behind the cabin. He moved quickly inside, warning Janie to stay out of sight. Her presence would complicate an already dangerous situation. The federal warrant hidden among his papers made any law enforcement contact potentially fatal. Janie retreated to the cabin's back room, but positioned herself where she could hear every word through the thin wooden walls. Her mind raced through possibilities and strategies. Everything they had built together hung in the balance of the next few minutes. Tully dismounted with theatrical authority, his badge glinting in the weak sunlight. His deputies spread out to cover potential escape routes. The formation was military precise, designed to intimidate rather than investigate. They had come prepared for resistance. The sheriff pounded on Caleb's door with unnecessary force. The sound echoed through the cabin like gunshots. When Caleb opened the door, Tully pushed inside without invitation, his eyes scanning the neat interior with obvious surprise. Checking on reports of vagrant activity, Tully announced, though his tone suggested he expected to find more than wandering travelers. His gaze lingered on the organized papers covering Caleb's table. The transformation from chaos to order was impossible to miss. Caleb remained calm despite the threat radiating from his unwelcome visitors. He had dealt with lawmen before, both as colleague and target. The key was showing strength without provocation. Any sign of weakness would invite closer scrutiny he couldn't afford. The conversation remained superficially polite while deeper currents of suspicion flowed beneath the surface. Tully asked pointed questions about Caleb's business activities, his trading partners, his knowledge of mineral deposits in the area. Each inquiry probed for weaknesses or opportunities. From her hiding place, Janie listened to the verbal chess match playing out in the main room. Tully's questions revealed his true interests. He wasn't investigating vagrant reports. He was gathering intelligence about land rights and mineral claims. The pattern was clear to anyone trained to read between legal lines. The sheriff's attention kept returning to the papers on Caleb's table. Legal documents that had been professionally organized. Correspondence written in elegant handwriting that clearly wasn't Caleb's rough script. Someone educated had been helping the mountain man with his affairs. "You've gotten organized since I saw you last," Tully observed with false casualness. "These papers look like lawyers' work. Professional quality." The implication hung in the air like smoke from a poorly tended fire. Caleb deflected the observation without directly lying. He had learned to be more careful with his business dealings. Everyone needed to protect their interests in changing times. The response was truthful while revealing nothing about his actual circumstances. The conversation might have ended there if not for a crucial mistake. One of Tully's deputies knocked over a stack of papers while examining Caleb's bookshelves. Documents scattered across the floor, including several that bore Janie's distinctive handwriting. Tully bent to collect the papers, his trained eye immediately recognizing the quality of penmanship and legal analysis. This wasn't the work of some traveling clerk hired for odd jobs. Someone with serious education lived here, someone who understood complex legal concepts and could apply them effectively. The sheriff's demeanor shifted from suspicious to predatory. His questions became sharper and more direct. Who had been helping Caleb with his paperwork? Where they could be found? How long this arrangement had been in place? Caleb's answers grew more evasive, which only heightened Tully's interest. The lawman sensed weakness and pressed his advantage. He threatened to search the entire property for evidence of illegal activity. Harboring fugitives carried serious federal penalties. In the back room, Janie made a decision that would change both their lives forever. She couldn't let Caleb face this threat alone. Her presence might complicate the situation, but her absence would guarantee his destruction. Sometimes survival required calculated risks. She stepped into the main room with quiet dignity, her chin raised despite the danger. Tully's shock was complete and immediate. The woman his town had condemned to death stood before him very much alive. Worse, she appeared to be thriving. The sheriff's face cycled through disbelief, anger, and calculation. Janie's survival undermined the moral authority of her banishment. Her obvious education and capability exposed the injustice of the town's judgment. Her partnership with Caleb created complications Tully hadn't anticipated. "Look who we have here," he said slowly, his voice dripping with false surprise. "The troublemaker who corrupted our children, alive and well despite Winter's best efforts." Janie met his gaze without flinching. Her transformation from the broken woman who had whispered about her lack of worth was complete. She stood as an equal now. Unashamed of her intelligence or her choices, the change was impossible to ignore. Tully's deputies shifted uncomfortably behind their leader. They had heard stories about Janie's heroic actions during the recent blizzard. May Weatherby had spread word throughout the territory about the rescue of stranded travelers. Some people were beginning to question the wisdom of her banishment. The sheriff found himself facing a dilemma he hadn't expected. Janie's presence provided ammunition against Caleb, but it also created political problems back in Willowbrook. Public opinion was slowly shifting in her favor. Heavy-handed action might backfire spectacularly. The standoff stretched taut as each side calculated advantages and risks. Outside, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, promising another test of survival that would determine more than just the weather. The storm struck with violent suddenness, transforming the tense standoff into a life-or-death crisis. Wind howled around the cabin with such force that the walls shuddered. Snow drove sideways in sheets so thick that visibility dropped to mere feet. Within minutes, the temperature plummeted to dangerous levels. Tully's horses panicked in the sudden whiteout, breaking free from their tethers and disappearing into the swirling chaos. His deputies huddled near the cabin door, their official authority meaningless against nature's raw power. The sheriff's planned interrogation became secondary to basic survival. Through the deafening wind came desperate shouts from the valley below. Human voices crying for help carried on the storm's fury. A group of travelers had been caught in the open when the blizzard struck. Their calls grew weaker with each passing minute as cold sapped their strength and hope. Caleb moved toward his heavy coat without hesitation. Years of mountain living had taught him that rescue attempts succeeded or failed based on immediate action. Every minute of delay meant higher chances of finding frozen corpses instead of living people. Tully grabbed his arm as he reached for the door. "No one survives out there," the sheriff declared with grim authority. "Going into that storm is suicide. We wait until it passes, then search for bodies." His pragmatic calculation prioritized known lives over unknown victims. Janie stepped forward with calm determination. Her education included more than just reading and mathematics. She had studied weather patterns in almanacs and survival guides. The storm's characteristics told her crucial information about timing and duration. "This is a fast-moving system," she announced with scientific confidence. "High winds but limited duration. The temperature will drop rapidly, but the worst will pass within 2 hours. The rescue window exists, but only if we act immediately." She moved to Caleb's collection of reference books and pulled out a detailed almanac. Her finger traced weather charts and seasonal patterns while her mind calculated probabilities. The data supported a dangerous but possible rescue mission. The voices from the valley grew more desperate. Children's cries mixed with adult shouts for help. May Weatherby's voice rose above the others, calling for her youngest daughter who had wandered away from their traveling group. The human cost of inaction became impossible to ignore. Janie began organizing supplies with military efficiency: extra blankets, rope for safety lines, lanterns with sufficient oil for extended burning. Her preparations were methodical and thorough, based on careful analysis rather than panicked reaction. Caleb watched her work with growing admiration. The frightened woman he had rescued weeks ago had transformed into a leader capable of coordinating complex operations under extreme pressure. Her intelligence served practical purposes that could save lives. Tully's deputies looked to their boss for direction as the situation spiraled beyond normal law enforcement protocols. The sheriff faced a choice between maintaining official authority and acknowledging the superior competence of people he had dismissed as worthless outcasts. The moment of decision arrived when May Weatherby's voice reached them through the storm. Her 6-year-old daughter had fallen into a hidden ravine and couldn't climb out. The child was trapped in a natural wind tunnel that would freeze her solid within the hour. Janie stepped into the leadership vacuum with natural authority. She assigned specific roles to each person based on their capabilities and the mission's requirements. Caleb would carry the rescue rope and handle the dangerous climbing. The deputies would manage the safety line and relay communication. Her plan was precise and executable. Tully found himself taking orders from the woman his town had condemned, his official authority subordinated to her superior knowledge and organizational skills. The reversal of power dynamics was complete and undeniable. They ventured into the storm in single file, connected by rope and guided by Janie's calculations about direction and distance. Her mathematical precision proved accurate as they located the trapped travelers within the predicted time frame. Her weather analysis had been correct about the rescue window. May Weatherby's relief at seeing Janie was visible even through the driving snow. The woman who had stood silent during the banishment now openly wept with gratitude. Social prejudices dissolved in the face of life-threatening crisis and demonstrated competence. The rescue operation required every skill Janie had developed through her education and recent mountain training. She coordinated the extraction of the trapped child while managing supplies and maintaining communication between team members. Her leadership kept the mission organized and successful. Caleb lowered himself into the ravine using techniques refined through years of dangerous mountain work. But it was Janie's tactical planning that made the rescue possible. Her ability to process complex information under pressure proved as valuable as physical courage. The return journey tested everyone's endurance as the storm reached peak intensity. Janie's predictions about duration proved accurate, but the intervening hours pushed human limits. Only her systematic approach to resource management kept the group moving towards safety. They reached Caleb's cabin carrying 3 rescued children and 2 adult travelers, in addition to May Weatherby. The small space became a field hospital as Janie organized treatment for frostbite and hypothermia. Her medical knowledge gained from systematic reading supplemented practical experience. Tully's deputies worked alongside their former prisoners to save lives, the artificial barriers of law enforcement forgotten in shared emergency response. Crisis had revealed true character and capability, rewriting assumptions about worth and authority that had seemed carved in stone. As the storm finally began to weaken, May Weatherby approached Janie with tears in her eyes. The rescued mother took Janie's hands in her own and spoke words that carried the weight of absolute truth and profound gratitude. "You saved my daughter's life," May whispered through her emotion. "You saved all of us. Everyone in Willowbrook will know what you did here today." The transformation was complete. The woman, dismissed as worthless, had proven herself invaluable when it mattered most. Her worth was no longer a matter of opinion or prejudice, but established fact witnessed by those who had initially condemned her. The confrontation came 3 days after the rescue, when federal marshals arrived at Caleb's cabin. Tully had sent word about harboring fugitives, hoping to eliminate his growing problems through official channels. The sheriff rode with the federal men, confident that legal authority would restore his control over the situation. Marshal Harrison dismounted first, his weathered face showing the skepticism of a man who had chased too many false leads through difficult terrain. His partner, Marshal Webb, surveyed the neat cabin with professional interest. The organized appearance didn't match their expectations of a criminal hideout. Caleb faced them with steady calm while Janie positioned herself where she could observe everything. The federal warrant hidden among his papers represented immediate danger, but running would only confirm guilt. Their only chance lay in confronting the accusations directly. Tully's smugness was obvious as he presented his case to the marshals. Harboring known fugitives, interfering with lawful activities, operating outside territorial jurisdiction. His accusations painted Caleb as a dangerous criminal who threatened federal authority throughout the region. Marshal Harrison listened with growing impatience to Tully's rambling complaints. The sheriff's motivations seemed more personal than professional. His focus on mineral rights and land disputes suggested private interests rather than legitimate law enforcement concerns. The conversation shifted when Janie stepped forward carrying a leather portfolio filled with carefully organized documents. Her appearance surprised the federal officers, who had expected to find crude mountain folk rather than an educated woman conducting legal business. Janie's voice carried quiet authority as she addressed the marshals directly. Before you proceed with Sheriff Tully's accusations, you should examine evidence of his own criminal activities. Her words fell into the room like stones dropped into still water. She opened the portfolio and began presenting documents with courtroom precision, financial records showing illegal property seizures, correspondence revealing sales of sensitive information to slave catchers, detailed accounting of bribes and fraudulent land claims stretching back several years. The evidence was overwhelming and meticulously documented. Janie had spent weeks organizing Tully's own papers, which he had carelessly left accessible during his various visits and investigations. His poor reading skills had made him blind to the incriminating nature of his written records. Marshal Harrison examined the documents with growing interest, while his partner watched Tully's face cycle through disbelief and panic. The sheriff had expected to destroy his enemies through federal intervention, not face exposure of his own extensive corruption. The most damaging evidence involved Tully's systematic theft of mineral rights from legitimate landowners. He had used his official position to intimidate property owners into signing documents they couldn't read, then sold their rights to mining companies for substantial personal profit. Janie's analysis revealed the full scope of the operation. Dozens of victims across the territory, hundreds of thousands of dollars in stolen assets, a criminal enterprise that had operated for years under the protection of a sheriff's badge and the victim's illiteracy. Marshal Webb questioned how an isolated mountain man had obtained such detailed financial records. Janie explained her role in organizing Caleb's business affairs, demonstrating her education and analytical capabilities. Her competence impressed the federal officers while terrifying Tully. The sheriff's desperation became obvious as he realized the trap closing around him. He accused Janie of forgery and fabrication, claiming the documents were falsified to frame an honest lawman. His protestations sounded hollow against the weight of physical evidence. Caleb produced the federal warrant bearing his own name, voluntarily surrendering the document that could have destroyed him. His honesty contrasted sharply with Tully's increasingly frantic denials. The marshals noted the difference in credibility between the two men. Marshal Harrison read the warrant charges carefully while considering the broader context of evidence presented. Caleb's alleged crimes involved showing mercy to desperate people. Tully's documented crimes involved systematic theft and betrayal of public trust for personal gain. The moral calculus was clear to everyone in the room except Tully himself. The sheriff continued protesting his innocence while the marshals examined proof of his guilt. His political connections and official position meant nothing against documented evidence of extensive corruption. May Weatherby arrived as the confrontation reached its climax, bringing testimony about the recent rescue that had saved her daughter's life. Her emotional account of Janie's heroism and leadership provided character evidence that demolished remaining prejudices about worth and capability. The federal marshals made their decision based on evidence rather than assumptions. Tully was arrested for corruption and fraud, while charges against Caleb were dropped in recognition of his cooperation and character witnesses. Justice finally aligned with truth after years of distortion. Spring arrived with the sheriff's departure in federal custody and recognition of Caleb's legitimate land rights. The mineral deposits Tully had coveted legally belonged to the mountain man, providing financial security for future plans. Their partnership had survived its greatest test and emerged stronger. Janie established a school in the expanded cabin, teaching literacy to children and adults from surrounding communities. Her students included former slaves, poor whites, and anyone else denied educational opportunities by social prejudice or economic hardship. Learning knew no boundaries under her instruction. Caleb supported the educational mission while continuing his trading business, now protected by proper legal documentation and Janie's analytical oversight. Their complementary skills created prosperity that benefited the entire region through fair dealing and honest practices. The transformation was complete on a warm day in late spring, when Janie addressed a mixed group of students gathered around the cabin's main room. Her voice carried confidence earned through trials that had tested every aspect of her character and abilities. "Worth isn't what others say about you," she told them with absolute conviction. "It's what you do with what you've been given." Her words reflected hard-won wisdom that had cost everything to achieve but delivered salvation to everyone it touched. Outside, Caleb listened to her teaching while planning expansion of their school building. Their partnership had rewritten assumptions about value and capability that society had considered immutable. They had proven that worth was internal and that dignity could overcome any external judgment through persistent truth and demonstrated competence.